when I was a little girl of 10, I was going to swimming lessons. Did you ever go to swimming lessons? But the thing about my swimming lessons was I had finally got my mum to agree that I could have a two-piece bather set. I wanted a bikini and she wouldn't be in that. She said, no, I was too little to wear a bikini. But I got a two-piece. Beautiful yellow and pinks and blues. Oh, I was so excited to have this two-piece bather. I couldn't wait to go to swimming lessons. I had a new towel. Everything was magical. Well, we were going to the beach as well for the swimming lessons, and I loved the beach. There was a lovely big jetty at this beach. I knew this beach because as kids we'd spend a lot of time there. So I was really excited. You know, things happen, don't they? So when I look back over that time, and I can still hear the comments, the hilarity, the mean remarks, I can still see that little girl standing on the edge of the jetty being pushed off, and all the laughter, I can hear it as I get thrown off the side of the jetty. Wasn't quite the swimming lessons that I was so excited to be going to. You know, there are times in your life when you look back over things and your stomach goes into knots, your heart might race, you might even feel tears or have tears come up, perhaps anger, perhaps find yourself get really upset about that time. But I find that when I look back, I'm able to observe little Gwenda rather than stepping into that, because I don't need to step into it. I know what happened there. I know what became of that day that I was so looking forward to, and my wonderful two-piece bathers. I know all of that. So when I reflect, I'm able to stand back as the observer and see all of what went on. And what I see most of all is myself trying to get out of the water really fast, get my towel and wrap myself up in it. And yes, I see the little girl crying on the beach. But something else. It wasn't about the name calling, the pointing fingers, the kids separating from me as if I had some kind of awful disease. It was that I didn't understand. I couldn't understand what was wrong with my birthmark. So all that I was concerned about was my birthmark. And I didn't know what was wrong with that. I couldn't understand why these kids were pointing fingers at me and calling me names and pushed me off the jetty because of my birthmark. These same kids were my classmates. These same kids I played with in the school ground, in morning tea at lunchtime, and we had a grand old time. And all of a sudden, because they could see my birthmark, I became somebody different. I couldn't understand that. And even then, so when I look at myself as that little girl being ostracized, called names and so forth, I observe what I did. And what I did was get out of that water and wrap myself in my towel. And yes, I was in tears, but my tears were about my birthmark. Why does my birthmark cause such a problem? I really couldn't understand it, because my birthmark was part of me and still is part of me. My birthmark had been with me since I was born, so it was just me. So why was it that these same children that I played with in the school ground every day, and some of them I went to their birthday parties, they came to mine, we were great friends until they saw my birthmark. And then I became the mockery of the class. But it was that I couldn't understand. So when we look over things in our life, if we step into them, if we step into those times, we can become really consumed by being that person again. So when I say to you, when I reflect on that time, I observe rather than become that little girl. And I still observe the fact that my confusion was over my birthmark. But as I grew up and as I went through teenagehood and then early adulthood, I still wasn't any more aware of my birthmark making me a different person than I was when I was 10. So the same thing would happen whenever I was going to the beach, or I went to the beach and I dropped my towel. If I had a two-piece bather on or a low-cut bather, friends would go, "Oh, wow, what's that?" But they didn't do what the kids did when I was 10. They would just be, "Wow, what's that?" And it would draw my attention back to my birthmark, which once again, I wasn't thinking about because it was just me. My birthmark was part of me. I was born with it. It was part of who I am when you look upon me, because that's how we view people, isn't it? We look at them with our physical eyes and we decide whether we like what we see or we don't. So my birthmark is dark like eyebrows, if you have dark eyebrows, but it's a dark chocolate brown, and it's the shape of an oval, and it sits right on my waist. So it's a perfect oval and on my waist. And then when I was nursing, we saw babies born with what's called a strawberry patch birthmark. And the parents would be beside themselves because often a strawberry patch birthmark appears on the face. And the first question from the mother would be, is that going to go away? Is that just a pressure mark? So the mother had already decided that her child was not good enough, that her child was disfigured, that people were going to point fingers and talk about her child. And me being there when those times came, people's baby came with a strawberry patch birthmark, I would really feel for the child. I would look at the mother and think, I guess I can understand what you're thinking, but I couldn't really, because no one in my family had made any big to-do about my birthmark. Possibly because it was covered up, I don't know. But it wasn't always covered up because, as I said, from the age of 10, it became visible to people. And then it became something that I was never aware of. So when I look at myself and I observe that little girl, what I saw was my confusion. And what I saw was my hurt at the names and things that I was being called, and the way that the children separated as if I had some kind of dreadful disease. But the next thing that I saw was I dropped my towel and I went back on that jetty because I had been so excited to be going to swimming lessons. And I was so excited about my bikini, well, two-piece. Wasn't allowed to have a bikini, but my two-piece bather. And I loved them. When I got home that day from school, my mum was never really a big conversationalist with us kids. There was 4 of us. I was the eldest. But my grandmother was, and when she come to visit, she asked about my swimming lessons. And I matter-of-factly told her what happened. And she said to me, But that's just you. There is nothing for you to feel any different about you. And that was all that was ever said about my birthmark and about me. So what I wanted to bring to you today is one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself in the way that you can be bold without being brash. You can be bold without being fake. You can be bold without being egotistical or demanding. Because you see, when you're bold from a place of authenticity, it's a whole different bold. Being bold and authentic means that you can rise above any adversity. So the topic of my talk today was sticks and stones and names couldn't shame me. And the reason for that was because I accepted, even as that 10-year-old girl, I knew that my sisters didn't have a birthmark like myself, but I never saw myself as a freak, as different, as not good enough to be in the family. That's just what I look like. So from a child, I accepted that's what I looked like. And that's what my body had on it, but it was me. Nobody else had my body, and nobody else can have my body. So to be bold and authentic is really about being able to embrace yourself for everything that is you. We get enough criticism and judgment externally without placing more of it onto ourselves. So being able to embrace all parts of yourself. You know, I know some people that are even so very critical of themselves down to their big toenail and how much they don't like their big toenail. But as soon as we become that judgmental on a part of ourselves, we create a separateness and we become separate in different areas of ourselves. Now we have really opened an area within our entire being that becomes what you might look upon as being a fracture, an open fracture. And would you believe that the more that we separate from that part of ourselves, the more of a wound we create ourselves? And then if we have anyone that happens to mention, oh, your big toe, what's wrong with that? That wound festers. That wound becomes deeper and the separateness is widened. And the more our separateness is widened, the more critical we become of ourselves and the more difficult we find it to manage in our life on everyday things. Isn't it funny? Our whole focus would go on that big toe. So it comes down to what I can wear and what I can't wear. And all of a sudden, this sense of seeing shoes in the shop window, seeing shoes on someone else, oh, well, I can't wear those. I wouldn't be able to wear those. And that creates a tremendous hurt within ourselves on such a deep level. So being able to look at all parts of ourselves and accept it as being, that's me, as being, this is who I am, this is my quirky toe. Now we don't have that separateness. We have a wholeness. And when we have wholeness, we have balance, we have security in ourselves. You know, so often we look for security externally, and it will always fall over. But when we have security in ourselves for all that we are, it's amazing how you change your whole life and the people that are in your life. Most often for us, our family are our continuous people in our life, right? Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but they say blood is thicker than water. So we're always connected. And then, of course, in the greater consciousness, we know that we are all interconnected somehow, some way. Once upon a time, it was that there was 6 degrees of separation between each of us. Now it's down to 2.8. Amazing. So things have changed so much. So if we are so very much interconnected, and we are interconnected with our family for our life, be it for better or for worse, how is it that we can create a separateness within ourselves when we are naturally in the web of life connected? Have you ever thought about it that way? We are naturally connected. We cannot be disconnected. Yes, people move away from our life because as we journey our life and we evolve, we become different in the different roles we take on. We become different through dropping habits, picking up new habits. But we ourselves should never be separate in ourselves. So I ask you today to think about yourself. How do you embrace you? How do you embrace every part of you that is so amazing? Because there isn't anything about you that isn't amazing, because you've been your unique, authentic self from the day that you were created and from the day you arrived into this life. There is no one like you. No one. So if you've got things about you that you want to point your own fingers at and draw attention to by way of not liking it, not accepting it, calling names. I mean, who needs other people to call us names when quite often we can find plenty for ourselves? And those names are so unfair, and they're not true. So we create our own reality through our own words of ourselves. Have you done that? Can you think of times where you have berated yourself? And once again, if there is that fracture through separateness that has been created from childhood, from a circumstance in life, when we call ourselves names, berate ourselves, we are now creating that wound, and that wound opens more. And funnily enough, when we are in that place, we all of a sudden seem to have people that see the same thing about us or want to say the same thing. So we find that as, oh, well, that's confirmation. But you see, it's not. It's a false confirmation of a false belief. And you've probably heard that phrase over and over, false beliefs, old beliefs. But it's a fact. And it's really the only way to describe it. What is a false belief? It is something that simply has been created through perception, through lack of acceptance, lack of love, lack of worthiness. It's something that has been built, but it's not true. Just so not true. It is very much around how we wish to choose to see everything about ourselves. So at the age of, what am I now? Nearly 62. 62 on Monday. Or am I 63? I can't remember. Why? It doesn't really matter. What matters is how I show up in the world, how I love to live life so passionately. I believe that everyone deserves to live a glorious life. Everyone. I believe that I came here as a privilege in this world to be able to experience this life. So I'm going to make it every bit of fun, every bit of wondrousness that I can find. And in a nutshell, I call that glorious. So my wish for you is that you can also find in your day something that you can say, well, that's just made it a glorious day. You know, there are very simple things to live by: kindness, compassion, empathy, love. Now, if you can do that for other people and you can show them kindness and you can show them compassion and you can display a deep sense of caring or love, then I ask you today to turn that back on yourself and bring all of that home to you. And check in with you and see if there are any of those fractures that you could pour kindness, acceptance, love, and compassion into. And may there be no separateness. You know, it's been an absolute joy to be here with you today and to be able to share my story of the little girl in her two-piece bather. Did love that two-piece bather. And my birthmark. I'm delighted to have been here at the She Is Me, and hope that you'll find some glorious moments in today and every day. I would welcome you to come across to the Heal with Gwenda community. Join us over there and maybe find some ways that you can bring glorious moments into your life, or visit my website, which is Heal with Gwenda. You know, the word heal with Gwenda in the business actually stands for harmonious, enlightened, aligned life, glorious life. So it's been a thrill to be here with you today. And I hope that I'll meet you again. And with Lisa and the other speakers, I wish everyone a very glorious life and a glorious time. I'm going to leave you with a couple of things for you to do. I'd like to ask you to visit yourself from head to toe. Head to toe. Top of your head to every one of your toes. And I'm going to ask you to see what you feel. Do you look away, or will you go the distance? See what it is that you recognize in yourself. Do you shirk away? Do you frown? Do you feel a well of emotion coming up where you want to cry? Maybe there's some anger. Maybe there's frustration. You've got that bit of belly fat that just won't go, and you've been working so hard to get rid of it. But I want you to take a hold of that belly fat and let yourself immerse into it and know that it's there for a reason. And you know what? The body's magical. It'll go when it's ready, not when you're ready, but it will go, because there's something else underlying that as to why it hasn't gone. But if you will start this process of starting from the top of your head, going all the way down to your toes, and see what you feel about every part of you, right down to how your hands look, how your elbows look, the number of people that don't like their elbows, your knees, have you got knobbly knees, bony knees, fat knees? What are the words that you use? And then I'm going to ask you to embrace every part of you as if you're wrapping yourself up in the biggest hug all over, and pouring into that hug, into every bit of yourself, kindness, love, laughter, and immerse yourself in all of that. And then click your heels together and say, I'm so lucky to be me. Because you know what? Even with the adversity you may be facing presently, you are still lucky to be you. Have a look around and you'll see why you're lucky to be you. And you can always change your circumstances. You know, there are simple lines of change your way of thinking, and people think, well, that's not that easy. Well, there you go. You've put that ceiling on that right away, rather than, what can I do to change my way of thinking? There's a change of way of thinking straight away. So your little exercise for today, and maybe every day, is to have a beautiful step into you from top to toe and notice what it is, what words, how you feel. And what you're going to find is the more that you do this, the more it changes. Until you write me and tell me you are having a glorious day, no matter what's around, you're having a glorious day in glorious you. So it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. And I look forward to meeting you, hearing from you, and being able to be back again with Lisa and the She Is Me conference. Freedom, the freedom to be you, the freedom to be bold and authentic. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.